Although this video is coming out in August, it was actually back in March that I started this build, kind of. I was putting together my Knight Tyrant for my kind of Knight allied force to my Death Guard, and I realised the sheer volume of spare parts in that kit meant I could do something interesting with the spare parts and create a kind of demonic Knight Tyrant with, a bit of conversion work, bit of milliput and green stuff, whatever. But I looked at it and thought the feet are the only part that I'm going to have trouble with. Now, I could do what I've done before and use like a doll or something like that to create the feet, which I've done on my Kitbashed Warhound Titan. But I thought, no, I'm going to cast up the feet. Now, I'd already got to the part where I'd built the legs, so it makes it slightly more awkward. But I took some blue stuff and actually that armature, so two different types of moulding material. I did a video on this fairly recently, just comparing all the different types, so actually recently, back in March when I was experimenting with it. So I cast up a two-part mould to do some moulding of the feet. And I'm not going to go into exactly how to do sort of blue stuff moulding and that kind of thing, so I've got videos on that. I'll try to remember to link them down below. But I did the mould, a little bit interesting because I had to slice the mould to get it off the feet, because obviously I can't pull it off the top because the leg's in the way. But you get the principle. So casting up the feet just through the moulds, and I do this quite a lot when I'm doing builds. I'll get halfway through or partway through a build and I'll take some castings or save some spare parts for projects for the future that may never come to fruition, but this one is doing. So I did the first sort of moulding of the foot with milliput. Now milliput can be quite brittle. Takes a lot of detail, it's quite cheap, it's reasonable to use. I use a lot of it, but it can be quite brittle. I used it mainly to see if the mould worked to start with, and I did actually manage to break one of the toes of the mould off when I was messing about with it. As you can see there, just pulling it out. So it is a little bit more brittle, but it's a lot cheaper than green stuff, and you'll see me later on use both in this kind of later build. But when I first moulded it, I wanted to do it milliput just to see if it worked. So that's how I got the feet. Now, fast forward to around a week and a half ago, I thought, right, it's time to get this build done. Now, I thought the feet were an issue, so I took milliput and green stuff and did a mix. Now, I could have done it all green stuff, but green stuff makes the pieces a little bit more flexible. And I didn't really want any flex in the feet, potentially. It's also much more expensive. But actually, you can mix milliput and green stuff together to get the best of both worlds with that kind of part. I'll also fill in here, as you can see, I took some castings of the shoulder armour on the Knight Tyrant, or I think it's Knight Dominus is the actual imperial name, but the Knight Tyrant is what you convert it to. I took some mouldings of the shoulder armour, I also took some mouldings of the missiles and things that will come up in later videos. Essentially the parts that weren't extra and excess in the kit that I knew I would need. So again, dropping some of that milliput and green stuff mix into the mould that I'd taken of the shoulder armour. You'll also see on the table there a mould that's actually taken from was it a Reaver Titan? Maybe the Reaver Titan, might be the Warhound Titan. Can't quite remember which it was taken from. I think it was the Reaver, and you'll see that being used later. So I demoulded that foot, demoulded the foot, and also demoulded the armour piece. And now it's kind of time to assemble the spare parts that came with the Dominus build. Now, I think the reason you get so many spare parts is that kit was originally split into two different boxes. You could build one variant armed with the plasma destructor and the laser blastery thing, if that's the right words, and you got another box with a variant with a harpoon gun and a flamer, whereas now they've combined those two variants. So actually on the sprue with the weapons and some of the other pieces, you actually get a full kind of top torso and a couple of panels and armour and things. So a really, really useful kit, and kind of what inspired this build. So yeah, I really like that kit for that purpose. This sheer volume of spare parts you get, and it is amazing. You don't get everything, and we're going to have to create some, which is why you couldn't do this for, an Imperial force or a Loyalist force, because there's going to be so much kind of empty space for things we don't have. But for putting together Nurgle or any kind of chaos and demonic knight, really, definitely going to be useful. You even get, as you can see here, the kind of top of the legs. Now this is the piece that goes from the top of the legs into the torso, and really that's where you run out of parts. You run out of parts for the bottom part of the legs, although you do have some armour panels. So the spare parts are focused mainly kind of around the top. You can see there a nice big hollow section. So now it's time to start doing the bit with the sprues. So we've built the top of the torso area, and now I'm really looking for a framework to go from the feet that we've cast up to the actual torso. So fairly simple, doing it by eye, just measuring up with old sprues against the legs of my completed Knight Tyrant, which again, if you're interested in looking at the House Maccabeus kind of knights, I've got a series of videos on the channel, and I chose Maccabeus because they're the knightly house that fights alongside the Death Guard. So yeah, just comparing it, roughly comparing it, you know, taking a measure from the waist to the ankles, from across the two pivot points where the sort of hips and things are, and just eyeing it up, chopping up those bits of sprue and gluing them together. Now, stupidly, I don't know what I've done with the footage of actually assembling this kind of armature, but I assembled a bit of an armature to sort of hold that top torso. Geared around, and you see a bit of actually drying there, so I've done a little L-shaped armature there using 2 pieces of sprue for each kind of side. For some reason I didn't film most of the rest of it. Now I decided, I got a part from a miasmic malignifier kit. I've probably bought 4 or 5 of these over the years, mostly for actually taking the parts and using them on conversions. A really useful kit with some nice chimneys and things. But I've got a couple of the torsos of the malignifiers knocking around, so having the knight stood up on one of those would be really useful. So you can see how I'm doing the feet. I've broken up the milliput feet, and that's why I decided to only cast one of the green stuff milliput mix, because actually, why do another one when I'm going to break these pieces off? So actually the brittleness played a nice part here. A minimal cleanup. I'm not making it perfect because, again, this is going to be a demonic knight. Plenty of opportunity for sort of fixing it later. So I'm making it so that the toes are kind of curved around the malignifier kind of chimney kind of thing there. Or boiler rather, and I'm going to fill the gaps in later on, so they're going to be segregated and separated from the actual sort of toe pad, but I'll fill the gaps in later. So working on that. Now the base is going to be done exactly like the rest of my Death Guard, so using a green stuff wool roller. Now I'm rolling up some paper here just to show if you ever use a green stuff wool roller, and I have done videos on how to use them, on a bigger base like this, something underneath to stop the base bowing inwards when you're pushing on it with a roller really helps. If you don't sort of prop the middle up, you end up with a big section in the middle where the detail won't take properly. So just a bit of a tip there. Plenty of water to stop the milliput sticking together. And again, I do that when using milliput green stuff, whatever, keep water on your hands, etc. Always get a comment about, oh, you shouldn't use milliput, you know, on your fingers and this, that, the other, because you can react. I do use something called liquid gloves. If you're interested in what that is, or gloves in a bottle, if you're interested in what that is, if you check my links down below to my Amazon shop, done a little PPE section, and gloves in a bottle is kind of I think it was done for medical purposes, maybe research purposes, whatever, but essentially it's like a cream you rub on, and it's like a barrier cream, and I've never reacted to milliput or green stuff while using it. I have a little bit when I've not used it and I've forgotten, so definitely works. Check that out down below if you're interested in it, but that's why you won't see me wearing gloves when using milliput and green stuff. Thought I'd mention it because people do often comment about trying to keep yourself safe, but I certainly do keep myself safe because I don't want any skin conditions. Thought I'd mention that one. Yeah, so going on back onto the base, you see there I've rolled the base out, and then I'm using the milliput as literally an adhesive to stick the miasmic malignifier down to the base. So before it dries, you do that. Now, in between a lot of these stages, I'm probably not going to mention it, but I do leave it to dry so that we're not working on sections that are still wet. Sometimes I don't, depends on the parts. I'll try to remember to mention when I've left it to dry overnight. Hopefully you can see the armature that I've now created. So we've basically got, you see that little spike going up where it's going to go into the torso at the top, and then a bent leg. And again, all just roughly measured from where the parts for the knight are. Setting the feet up so we're happy, and then pressing it into this milliput. Now the base is still wet here, you can see the shine. And then taking 2 blobs of that milliput that I've mixed and putting them onto the top of the feet and pushing this armature through into the kind of foot sockets that are there. So really using this milliput as kind of the adhesive to hold the kit together. It sets absolutely rock solid, will give a load of real rigidity, and actually probably is a lot easier than trying to glue it together with super glue or plastic glue and things. And it will start off the kind of demonification, if that's even a word, or the Nurglification of the actual kit. So yeah, pushing it together, and don't leave it to set quite away, because I'm going to do a little bit of work on there to Nurgle it up before it dries. Now these armour panels are not from the original Knight Dominus kit. Again, if you watch the channel for a long time, you know I bounce in between 30k, 40k, but I do a lot of kind of Nurgly stuff. Now this was from, I'm going to say, the Cerastus Knight Lancer that I did, and I really Nurgled that one up, so it's definitely worth checking that one out. Playlist will be linked on the channel for that, but my Nurgle Knight list, you'll see there, did a really kind of Nurgly demonic knight with a freaky shield. But these are the excess kind of leg armours that you get in there, because when you get those kits, you get a set of leg armour for Sons of Horus and a set of leg armour for kind of the Loyalists. So just trimming it down, taking off some of the Sons of Horus symbology, but not all of it. Leave some of it on, it won't really matter, it'll look a bit interesting, and then battle damaging it. So attacking it with a pair of clippers, using a hobby knife to sort of scrape bits off, pin drill to drill in some bullet impacts and really just try and show that this has been, seriously at war. And when you combine that with the mutation bits we're going to do later, happy days. Now to seal that on, a big lump of milliput onto the leg, a slightly different lump to hold it out, and I'm really trying to make this armour stand out around about as far as it is on the official model. And obviously I've got the official model for reference to one side. So pushing that on and using that to really, really glue that on. Now at this point, I wasn't 100% sure, and I'm still not 100% sure, how I'm going to do the kind of the legs and make it all look demonic. So in case any of this milliput was going to show on the finished model, I'm texturing it up so it looks like kind of demonic skin. Now what this is, on the cocktail stick there, is a very small casting, or a trim of a casting of a Glotkin model. So the Glotkin skin, I took a casting using the blue stuff that you've seen before, and then I've just trimmed a little bit out, and what's on that little bit is kind of lumps and bumps off the Glotkin skin that I can then use as like a presser to indent it into the milliput on here. There's a lot more about that on my video where I did a possessed kind of warhound. It was basically a scratch build, and I use that to texture the whole skin. So before the milliput dries, I'm doing that. Now I might end up covering that up in the later build, not 100% sure, but I suppose it pays to be safe at this point. It's like, well, it may end up showing later, so make your life easier as you go on further and just texture it. It doesn't take a great deal of time to do that. And again, if you want more details of how to make those little texture pressers, that's on the Kitbash Warhound Titan video. So this is all thoroughly set for a couple of days, taking a plug of milliput into the bottom of the torso and wedging it onto that kind of spike that is coming off the leg armature there. So pushing that in, you can see the amount of battle damage I've done on that top torso for now. I've even peeled open the window, and we'll see that later. So here's how it's kind of holding together for now. Now I didn't texture this bit because obviously that is nowhere near going to show later on because we've got a lot of demonic bits to do. That has now dried overnight, and it really did set solid. It's quite top heavy at the moment, but the armature I've made, I've done, again, 2 lengths of sprue each time to try and make it a bit more solid. And now it's kind of putting on the armour parts that we've got rescued from other places. So that sort of shin armour is there. Now, again, just using a hobby knife here, or sculpting tool you could use, whatever you could use, a stick, end of a paintbrush, whatever, and just pushing that milliput onto the armature to really seal it in. Now the thigh armour that we've got is from, I'm going to say, Mephitic Blighthaulers. I think that's where I've saved that from. I did some Mephitic Blighthauler conversions going back a good couple of years, and these parts have lived in my bits box ever since. Don't need to do the thigh armour as such, and I did actually have some spare thigh armour from other Knight builds, but I thought this was a little bit more interesting and starts to introduce the Nurgle side of it. Now the weapons, when you build the spare weapons, you don't get all the linkages to go into the shoulder parts. So all I've done is built the weapon and pushed a bit of sprue, cut the corner off so it's got a straight part at an angle, and this is going to go under the shoulder. But I want to get the cast up armour panel you've seen already onto the shoulder first, so just a little bit of armature sticking on there, a bit of sprue to support it. Realised actually that's the wrong place when I tested where it was going to go, so I just very quickly moved it. In a second you'll see me test it, and that's the kind of thing I would encourage you to do when you're doing these kind of builds. Be flexible. When you're doing it, be quick. What you might try might not work. You've got to kind of move it around and just experiment. The beauty of a kind of Nurgle, particularly Death Guard, Kitbash and army, is there's really no right way of doing it, because you make a mistake, well, it's Nurgle, it's chaos, it doesn't really matter. Move it around, mess it about. If you make a mess of the model, or the glue goes everywhere, or whatever, it makes the texture a bit weird, doesn't matter. It's Nurgle. So yeah, sticking this on, taking this armature here, and I did just put this one piece on, glued it with super glue, and you'll see in a minute I end up tearing it off again because I don't quite like how it was done. So I've actually glued the weapon on, you can see it already, and I did that with the armour panel, and I kept popping it off. So I've gone back again and taken some milliput to use that as kind of a sealant to put a little bit of extra strength onto that shoulder panel. You'll also notice I've left the hole where the missile racks and stuff are going to go. You'll see what I'm going to do with those on a later video. I'm not quite fully decided. And you'll see there underneath how I've glued the armature in. Now, just for some extra strength, took a blob of the milliput and just wedged that over that bit of sprue that I'm using to hold it in place. And that will, again, you've got to be careful how much weight you try and take with it, because obviously the milliput, I'd leave it for probably half an hour, 40 minutes before you do this kind of side, so it's got a little bit of tension in it. It's lost a bit of stickiness, but you can see there it does kind of, the weight starts flopping back down into the arm. And to make sure I held it in the right position, put a bit more milliput in there, but then started thinking this isn't going to hold. and just found a small piece of a model to wedge in between the sort of torso and the weapon to hold it at the right place. That's one thing you've got to be careful with when you are using milliput as a glue like this, because you might think, oh, it's in the right place, go away, do something else. You might not notice over the course of hours that it kind of sags a little bit because of the weight. So try and wedge it in position. And here it's just, again, apart from a miasmic magnifier that I've put together, that I'm going to be using hopefully later in the build. So that has now fully sealed and dried and kind of overnight, or going to. One of the things I do talk about, I don't really show it very often, is whenever I've got some milliput left from a project, I always kind of make something with it. You'll see a little plastic bag on top of the paint palette there, the wet palette there, and that's got little balls of milliput and things in there that you'll see me using in the build later. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh, I might want some tentacles and things on here. So I just quickly knocked up some very smooth, not suckered, not fancy, just knocked up some tentacles before this milliput kind of dried and wasted, because it's a big shame if you've mixed up a bit too much to waste it. I also have a number of moulds knocking around, so I've made a lot of moulds of parts over the years, so I'll just grab a mould and I'll just chuck the excess milliput into that and end up casting up a part that I may never use, or I may end up using it multiple years down the line. So really think about trying not to waste any excess kind of parts. Now, I've torn the weapon off, okay? Decided I wasn't happy with its position, clipping it off, and we'll move on again. I've also forgot to film the fact that I've put a face onto the knight, so there a blob of milliput, bit of sprue, and that is the face off. I'm going to say it's a bloat drone. It's one of the two-part bloat drone faces, and that's going to represent the face of the knight. And this piece here is the cast-up part from, it's one of the Titans. It's a Reaver or Warhound. I think it's a Reaver part. It's the guy that's stuck to the roof inside it, and I took a moulding of that. So it's kind of a nice, possessed, kind of chaosy bloke on this cast-up. Chopped all the bits around the edge because this is going to be the exposed pilot. I didn't want it to be too recessed into it. I want him quite up to the kind of window, almost as though he was in his chair. The demon's been taken over and he's basically forcing him out, and he's this kind of tortured little soul that's left in there. So that was quite a little vignette piece in there. Now obviously I've used that milliput to glue him in, and you don't want to leave it just looking like a sausage of milliput. So again, taking a sculpting tool and just putting some Nurgle texture on. Other videos have talked about how I put Nurgle texture on, and I will be showing it on the next video for this model, because I'm going to do a lot of the demonification kind of stuff next time. So why did I reposition it? Wasn't quite happy with how the weapons were hanging. Didn't feel like they were centralised to the shoulder pads. So I figured rather than kind of permanently being unhappy, because I have done models before where I've kind of gone, it'll be all right, but it's always kind of bugged me afterwards. So I thought, clipper it off and let's just give it another go, because I'm mixing up some more milliput anyway. It won't take too long to clipper that kind of thing off. So definitely happier with where I repositioned it, and also put on the harpoon arm on the side. So that's where we've got to with the build. It's still very skeletal. There's a lot of work to do on there, but hopefully you can see the kind of vision of where I'm going. I've now got to decide how I'm going to add on all the demonic flesh. I've got some more weapons to add on still, but I thought it'd be interesting to show the build kind of partway through and then talk you through my kind of decision-making process as I'm going. So I hope you enjoyed that. Still a lot more to do on this build. So hopefully you'll keep following along. If you liked it, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and I will see you again.